Zoom, zoom, Connor. Oh, fucking Brian.
Hi, everybody. I'm channeling in from my parents' basement in Scranton, Pennsylvania, in the hill section. Send me a picture of yourself, and I'll give you the address. I'm doing my best to get along. I was in Australia for pretty much all of February, and then I came back early March.
Yeah, why?
Well, because the thing is interesting. Overseas, they were taking this much more seriously early on. So I kind of saw the writing on the wall. So instead of going back to New York, I came here. What will happen of my little humble abode in New York is still pending. Hopefully, Governor Daddy Como will come through with a law of some kind. Hopefully, but if not, I'm prepared. And I'm very grateful to have a place to crash. I'm back in my childhood bedroom. That's fun.
Well, I was just listening on the way back into Scranton. They were saying on the radio that as if they weren't already really bad, the 30-somethings moving back into their parents' home. It's even worse now because of what's going on. So,
sure.
They were saying there are plenty of houses available for those who listen. On the upside.
One correct.
It goes by quick, mother sucker. It goes by quick.
Oh, I turned 29 in July. It's flashing by.
I did this to you. I just got back into town. I will tell the folks. I don't know if we got wires. I went away for Easter for a couple of days. Don't worry. I didn't come in contact with any fucking lepers in between here and there. And I just got back and I'm thinking like, all right, well, let's do this. I was thinking you popped in my head. So I kind of I thrust this upon you quick. I was like, let me get in touch with Conor O'Brien. I'm
so happy to. I'm glad you did. I've been watching all the episodes. I've missed one. I think you put out 4 so far.
I did a big push out of 4.
I watched Conor, the other Conor, Simone, Bobby Keller, your one friend who looked lovely and it looked funny. I didn't have a chance to watch that one yet. So if I pick any of her films, I apologize. I'm unaware.
That's okay. It hasn't happened yet. We're still early enough along, and funnily enough, like there's been certain people whose picks have just been really eclectic. It depends on the person, you know what I'm saying? So no one seems to be able. I don't think anyone's worlds will collide.
Yeah, mine are. Without revealing anything, I sat down. I looked at them. There's definitely themes catching and stuff like that, and I really tried hard. Because as you know, I think we're similar in this way, that asking me to pick top 5 of any kind of medium of storytelling is really, really hard. The way I get around it is that if you're asking me today on April 13th, 2020, what are my top 5 picks? My answers are my answers. You ask me tomorrow, maybe it'll change.
Right. And I have to just accept that fact. But I'm completely comfortable with that. As of right now, in this moment, being in the moment, the actor that you are, Conor O'Brien, give us which ones, your honorable mentions first, your 5. Everyone does it a little differently.
Okay. I'm going to dive in. Oh, I don't know what order to do. Do you have any suggestion on order? Nothing? Okay. I'm going to start with this one, and I'm going to disclaim this with, I was into it since I was 12 years old. No one had to tell me that I'm supposed to like it. No one had to tell me it's my community's one of their many staples. A little gem called Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
I was queuing it up. So it's a long clip, but she's, as you can see, she's about to.
Is it the one where she's about to put the plate down?
Of course. I was trying to find something quick, but I knew to get ready.
I've written a letter to Dad. It is. I remember the first time I saw it, I was sick home from school. It was on Turner Classic Movies. I was 12 years old. And I remember my mom saying, "Oh, yeah, I think you're old enough to see that."
I was just going to say, I can't imagine being thrust into that movie that way without any context.
No context.
I was much older, so I knew what to make of it. But to find this movie would terrify me as a kid, I think.
It's really unsettling, but it was so beautiful. And and I consider myself, not an expert, but I grew up around old movies in black and white. That's not a strange medium to me, but there's something about the sound design. I mean, they did it on a budget, right? I mean, that was the whole point. They did it on, a couple of sets, very few locations. That house is probably 70% of the movie. On set. And the music and the colors, even though it's black and white, the color saturation of the darkness and the grays, it's just so good. And it just can't be enough to be wonderful. But there's some genuine moments of
there's
a moment.
because the novel, everyone at the time had loved the novel.
Mm-hmm.
They knew they were dealing with a good story, but they also knew they were dealing with this arc. There was the camp element. I don't know if it was predetermined or if it was something that just came because of the people involved, or how the campiness. The book was a sensation at the time.
Right. Well, I mean, and you have to remember that there was the added value of not just the story that it was telling, but the stars that were telling it, and it's so weird for them to be doing this, because it might as well have just been an exaggerated horror metaphor.
And that's where I'm saying I think the camp may come from. Just like you're saying,
sure.
I think that's where the camp may have come from. I don't think
it was Betty Davis and Joan Crawford just pissing on every scenery they possibly.
Which is why later on, Ryan Murphy found so much material in just the making of that film alone, which is pretty much how I think
I will give him so much credit. The TV series Feud, they've only done one. That's the only season they've done so far, is the Betty and Joan. I will say it's beautiful, it's stunning, it's perfectly made. The performances are wonderful. I do not think Jessica Lange was that great.
Oh, you mean Feud? Oh, yeah.
What are you talking about?
Well, I forgot. I didn't realize you had transitioned into talking about Feud. Jessica Lange as Betty, I think she had a hard road ahead as Joan Crawford. She had a hard road ahead of her because she had to undo, of course, what Faye Dunaway had done. So I think that's why she played it super safe. But I agree.
Faye Dunaway, I mean, obviously she was a little too old now for the part, but I mean, Faye Dunaway, I think, is a more accurate. I mean, Faye Dunaway is doing an impression, right? I mean, she's doing a more intense, accurate impression. Jessica, if this was like on the stage, I would have said Jessica Lange was amazing. But given the power of do it again, cut, editing, the time that you take, Susan Sarandon, I mean, doesn't really look, other than the eyes, doesn't really look like Betty Davis. I mean, she's far, which is interesting. Susan Sarandon was older than Betty Davis was at that time. As an actress.
Which goes to show the evolution of not only human beings, but Hollywood along with it, that she,
right. It also shows you what, Betty Davis, despite what people like to say that Joan Crawford was the greater beauty, Betty Davis was a bombshell.
Oh my God.
She just was unique, and also just smoked probably like 30 packs a day.
Not only that, but she had an opinion. You know what I mean? She wasn't one to just lie down, and she was in charge of her career. She was in charge of her men. She was in charge of everything.
So with that being said, whatever happened to Baby Jane, hands down, I mean, influences everything I do artistically. I'd be lying if I said I didn't. And I know that it's like almost a gay cliche at this point. I truly discovered. It doesn't, not that it matters. I don't, I'm a big believer in not liking something because it's popular is just as stupid as liking something only because it's popular.
Of course.
I like it. It is what it is. Right. Moving on. This is my most modern offering on my list. This is the most recent, I think 2015, 2016, but
okay.
And it's a little, it won Best Picture, so it's a little obvious but I mean, I just have to say Moonlight, I think, was one of the best so far. I mean, well, if we're technically at the end of the decade, are we is that decade over, or is this the last year of that decade?
What?
I guess it depends on
decade.
Whatever the 2010s, the 10s.
The aughts. Oh yeah. This would be the end. We'd be, I guess, the 20s.
Well, no, the aughts are already over. Now the 10s are over, because it was 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14. Yeah. So the aughts of its
teens, and then the 20s.
Now we're in the 20s. Yeah. But, of the 2000 teens, it was the 2010s. I think it was one of the best, if not best, movie made, hands down.
I can't agree or disagree because I haven't seen it. All I know is that it comes highly recommended by many people whose opinions I value strongly. So I can stand by that.
Not only is it visually stunning and the script is beautiful, but the performances, especially, I mean, the two main characters. Absolutely, the two main characters are played at 3 different chapters of their life, each by there's 6 actors, playing these characters. And it's just, the casting was perfect. And I mean, I know it's almost,
it must be. That's a bold statement to make that you just made about it being one of the hands down. I mean, that's a bold statement. I will have to I was already told to watch it, so I will have to.
It was so good. I screamed in joy when the correction was made at the on that. That was the Oscars when
Oh, was
they
that the
messed up and they
year?
fucked up.
Oh,
Yeah, that was
La La
La La
Land.
Land, and then which I mean, just so the end. I mean, which if you like La La Land, by the way, it's fine. It was a fun popcorn movie. It was beautiful, but like, doesn't hold a candle to the
Right,
artistry.
you're
of
talking
what it
about two
was.
different worlds there. Absolutely.
Completely. Okay, moving on to my third choice. Let's go with. Oh, again, this is where the trend of my taste seems to find a trend. A little 1989 gem called Heathers is. Oh,
Fuck me
oh,
gently with a chainsaw, Heather.
oh, so good. Little known fact, I only found out because I started researching. I'm like, be prepared with little tidbits, so I'm not going to pretend like I just knew this. But Heather Graham was supposed to be one of the Heathers. I think she was the Heather. She was supposed to be.
That makes perfect sense considering the timing and the look.
And then her parents wouldn't let her do it. She was like 17 at the time, and it was
Hey, Sarah, Sarah.
and Winona Ryder just
They created a language. That was one of the first movies that I can remember where a whole new language was created and played with. I don't know the woman's name offhand who wrote the film, but I do believe it was a woman.
Yeah.
But she was smart enough to weave the culture into it, but not date it. So instead of using actual language, she just made up her own, which doesn't date the film in any way. It's just it's exclusive to Heathers, and that's it.
But
and
yet at the same time, is so late 80s, early 90s. Like it's so fat. I mean, aesthetically. But you're right though. No, I mean, there's a reason why that movie keeps. There's a reason why that movie keeps getting remade over and over under a different name.
Right.
And
Mean Girls.
Right.
Jawbreaker. Many.
List goes up. Which I mean, to be fair, no, Heathers did not invent the concept of a dark comedy. But there's something about that. I mean, I'm obsessed with it. There's something about that time period of your life where everything is so meaningless, but yet it feels so real and intense. So the genius of that is you when you're a teenager, everything's life and death, and this movie literally makes it life and death, which is just so.
It does.
I will stand by though. Who was so there were the three Heathers, Shannon Doherty, obviously. Who were the other? I know this is shameful.
The one girl, I forget her name. She passed away at a young age.
She passed away. Not the main Heather, not Heather, but like there was Shannon Doherty. Shannon Doherty. This sounds shameful. I only know them by their colors, but there was the red Heather, right? Which I want to say that was
turquoise.
Heather McNamara, maybe. They had very distinct names. There's like Heather Chandler, Heather McNamara, and Heather Duke. I think Shannon Doherty was Duke. Whatever it is, it's after the first Heather has died because Slater and Winona Ryder are already on their. Spoiler alert, by the way, if you haven't watched Heathers from 1989. But they
Clyde were the modern day Bonnie and Clyde.
It's when other little fact that was originally supposed to be for Brad Pitt, but then the producers thought he was too nice, and so they said which makes total sense.
It does.
So they went to little JD, Christian Slater doing his little Jack Nicholson impression.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's but no. So it's right after they kill they strip down and they kill the football jocks.
Yeah,
and it's Shannon Doherty and the other Heather standing outside the school like against a car, going. I think it's one of the best line deliveries. Going, oh, nothing ever happens here, and then some miscellaneous supporting character just comes into frame with her backpack and goes, "Did you hear school's canceled because so and so and so and so killed themselves in a homoerotic murder suicide?"
I love my dead gay son.
And then Shannon Doherty's reaction of, "No way," is one of.
Mom, Dad, I've really got to motor if I'm going to make it to this funeral. You know what I mean?
So good. It's so good. And it was
good. The thing about Heathers is it was so perfectly self-aware. It knew exactly what it was doing. It was in the hands of. I wish I knew because
it is also, in my opinion, one of the only movies to go on to inspire a musical version that actually did that captured it well. If you've never listened to the soundtrack from Heathers the musical, which actually, by the way, our Simone Daniel worked on the workshop. She was on the crew for the original workshop production of that eons ago.
Episode number one.
It's on my what?
Episode number 1, Simone Daniel.
I know she would go back. I mean, it was, it's all tying together. It was so good. I mean, like Winona Ryder allegedly went to the opening night or went to the original run of the musical and like hugged the creator saying like, you got it exactly right.
I think maybe you and I spoke of that or I spoke of it with somebody. Sorry, I scratched my eyeball, so it's all red. On top
okay?
of yeah, I'm feeling great. Well, don't worry, I smoked some weed to even it out, but this one hurts. So Heathers, wonderful choice.
So good. Okay.
I had already referenced it actually in a past video because Simone brought up Clueless, and I was like, oh well, and then we talked about the same thing because I said Mean Girls. I was like, well, Clueless did it to Heathers, so it wasn't mentioned before, but it has its own standing mention.
Oh, it's so good. Okay. My next one is a little on the softer side. It's another 60s film though. To pair it with Baby Jane. It's from 1963. Excuse me. Charade, starring Audrey Hepburn and Cary Grant. I felt it's a little interesting tidbit. I already knew this though. It's one of the most famous. I mean, they were the biggest stars in the world, and due to a paperwork error, it immediately entered the public domain upon release.
Well, the same thing happened.
It also had to delay
with Night of the Living Dead, and then that haunted them forever until pretty recently, actually.
I would argue, though, who is in? I mean, but like that wasn't Audrey Hepburn and Cary Grant in the early '60s. That's in Wall Street.
But think about every single horror film ever using the likeness of
absolutely.
Ever.
Absolutely, no, absolutely. I'm just saying, but like. There's one to argue that like, oh, maybe you didn't know the volume it was going to reach. I mean, this movie was like Stanley Donen.
I see. Theirs was also an oversight. I understand with you. With this one, it was already set to be. There should have been keener eyes on the situation.
Yeah, it's just so beautiful. Henry, is it Mancini? Is that how you pronounce it? The music, like the composer. He did the music for it. It's just so much fun, and it's quirky. There's some dialogue that's a little stale. And Cary, it's interesting also because it kind of speaks to the self-awareness of Cary Grant, because the original script, like everything of its time, had him being the sexual aggressor. And and mind you, he's
listen to me, damn it.
Considerably older than Audrey Hepburn. I mean, super handsome, but considerably older. And he went to them and said, no, I need to be the one pulling, not only because it made sense narratively without ruining anything, that his character would be the more reserved in that respect, but also he said it's going to read creepy. And this is the early 60s.
Right.
And he's like,
well, and this was also, mind you, a major transitional period tonally in film. You're going from these campy, oversaturated, of their time, like romance films, if you will, or take your girlfriend to the movie type of films, into some darker territory, some more character-driven things, like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf and different films.
Absolutely.
That started really diving into some gritty material and showing ugly people, and there was a transition period there. So like Charade, I haven't seen the film. You know what I mean? But I do know of it.
I'm pretty sure you can find it on YouTube at this point because of the domain thing. It's just it has some fantastic. The interesting thing is it very often, not as much anymore, but especially in like the 70s, 80s, 90s. I guarantee you've seen it. You've seen moments of it lampooned. There's a very famous scene where, well, this doesn't ruin anything. You find out about this in the first like 15 minutes. The whole premise is she's young, beautiful, married to a distant rich husband. He's killed off, who she's going to divorce anyway. He's killed off in the first like 30 seconds. And then his funeral, there's like no one there except, and there's like this intrigue and money.
Well, you can't have any feeling for him at all. So he's just like
no.
Let's show the things that are appropriate and move on.
None. There's a great moments that they use with her in relation to it. There's a gorgeous scene where she comes home when she finds out and their Parisian apartment is totally empty. He sold everything off when she was away with her friend in the Swiss Alps. And it's just this shot of Audrey Hepburn running through an empty, huge Parisian apartment with nothing in it. And it's just stunning. And of course, she's gorgeous and you could just watch her the whole time. But there's a scene where he's in a funeral. You never see his face, but these mysterious characters who quickly become our supporting, villains show up and they're testing to see if he's dead. So one sticks him with a needle. One puts a little mirror under his nose to make sure he's not secretly breathing. And I've seen that. I didn't know it, but I've seen that lampooned like Daria lampooned that once,
Sure.
random, like in a random scene. So it's
When-
interesting that there's elements of this movie that have lived on, and typically when you parody something, like people know, like, oh, they're parodying The Wizard of Oz, they're lampooning
Oh yeah.
The Sound of Music, but you don't necessarily know where this is from.
It was someone's
Mhm.
personal, someone else out
Mhm.
there who loved it just as much as you.
It's-
That was like, this deserves a.
It's just charming, and it's an interesting character dynamic. She was just gorgeous, but like not even that, nothing to do with appearance, obviously, but just the demureness and the like. I mean, she wasn't, she wasn't, the most, critically acclaimed artist, but there was just something about her and the character she portrayed. People mock her for being over the top, but when she was quiet and subtle, she did some beautiful work.
Sure, and you're also forgetting the audiences were completely different, and expectations were completely different, and everything was completely different, which changes everything. So it's hard to compare.
So good.
Move along with this list. I love it.
So my fifth movie.
Already number 5. All right,
that's number. Yeah, I blew through them. I'm gonna mention my honorable mention first, though. My honorable mention goes out to 1985 Clue. I thought that I kind of had the dark comedy, murdery element, between Baby Jane and Charade a little too much, and I wanted to show some, because I do have a variety. That movie is just so perfect. That movie's so perfect. And what's funny about it,
waiting for someone to say it at some point anyway, so it's okay.
So perfect. It's so perfect. I will say, you go back and watch it, there is some weird wooden delivery from certain people in scenes. Like the editing is weird at times and is like a little I mean, mind you, I can quote it verbatim. Like if you played it right now and put it on mute, I could mouth I'm not joking, every single line.
I think there might have been, I know you can't, and I've heard roundabouts of this. I think there was maybe a wobbliness in what they might be trying to achieve, and especially with a movie like that, there's a pace that has to go to. I think there were certain things that might have stuck out because they were going in several different directions, and you're seeing.
It's someone just wrote a bunch of good one-off jokes and then turned to like their board game and went, let's base it on a Parker Brothers board game. Like there was there's some clever storytelling there. I think part of it is if they leaned 2% more into it, because by the time you get to the, for spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen it, there's like multiple endings, and maybe this happened or this could have happened, playing off of the trope of the board game has a million, 1,000 ways, the combinations to end. The thing is, though, and again, I'm a huge nerd, the first 2 versions, when you go back and you watch the movie again, you're like, oh yeah, that does make sense. By the third one, it's impossible. People are on different floors. There's no way they could have gotten from here to here that quickly. And again, if they leaned into it and literally, if someone made one joke about like, that's not physically possible, that would have been perfect. And that to me is the only little bow it's missing. The only bow.
Well, that's why. Well, that's kind of why I bring up that they might have been wobbly in certain ways. They were thinking about presenting it later on in the future, about editing it and stuff, and things like that. Why maybe some performances might stand out as wooden, because I'm thinking maybe they weren't sure how it would play or how it would be put together ultimately, depending on certain things. I mean, because you never know.
Mm-hmm. I will. So that's my honorable mention. My fifth and final film. It's a category. I am going to give a specific title, but I'm going to state I sat down for my fifth one, and I knew in my heart of hearts it was impossible for me to not pick a Drew Barrymore film. I could not make this list and
I think I know what it is, but go ahead now.
I'm curious. I don't think you're going to. I'd be curious to know what do you think it is. If you're right, I will. I promise I won't lie. I'll tell you the truth.
Ever After.
No, and only because that movie is comically beautiful to me and like heartwarming and touching. It's not inherently like a masterpiece of a film. It's really good. I picked directed by Penny Marshall, Riding in Cars with Boys.
I just talked about that. Why did you watch me talk about it?
No.
That was I said the Drew Barrymore movie that I relate to the most, that I love, that reminds me of my childhood growing up, is Riding in Cars with Boys.
Oh, that's fabulous.
But I said the only thing is her playing. I went on, go back and watch. I said her playing the mother of a guy that is the same age as her was the only thing that took me out of that film. And I said, well, just because I said, all she did was put out an affected tone and she wore a heavier coat. And now I'm your mother. Bam. I bought it.
I know. Yeah, that just goes to show you the way Hollywood treated women. Sally Field went from
Well,
playing
it was
Tom
her
Hanks's,
own movie. That came from her own production house, of course.
right.
So,
And it was kind of a meeting of two worlds because I knew I needed a Drew Barrymore film, and I knew I had to represent Penny Marshall somehow. Like
I appreciate that because A League of Their Own, was mentioned by Stephanie Marinchek, the girl you said that looked so nice that I interviewed. My friend Stephanie Marinchek. That's her number one.
I'm glad.
Her number one is A League of Their Own, which is
I'm going to pull this up real quick because it shocked me how little I respected the filmography as a director of Penny Marshall. Like, I did not truly comprehend how many amazing films this woman has either produced or directed.
Okay, go ahead. I'll do that. Do it quickly.
Filmography, where as an actress, hold on. As a director, starting from 86 to 2001, Jumpin' Jack Flash, Big, Awakenings, A League of Their Own, Renaissance Man, The Preacher's Wife, The Preacher's Wife, and Riding in Cars with Boys is the last film she directed. And then as a producer, she brought to you Calendar Girl, Getting Away with Murder, With Friends Like These, Risk, Cinderella Man. She also produced Bewitched, the 2005 with Will Ferrell and Nicole Kidman, but we'll forgive her that.
Yeah.
She also did a bunch of.
Well, don't forget about.
She also directed a bunch of.
Between the two I mean, they're TV and cinema royalty for sure.
Absolutely. Penny Marshall knew how to give us Hollywood magic cinema, but still keep it salt of the earth, like Middle America.
That's very true. That's a good way of putting it. It's always. That's very important. You're trying to get your audience to relate to what you're showing them. If it's Audrey Hepburn running through an empty palace in fucking Paris, yeah, nice because it's pretty, but I don't feel emotionally connected to that because I don't live in that world. But A League of Their Own, there is no crying in baseball because there isn't. You know what I mean? And Riding in Cars with Boys, I think mom and dad are in the house drying weed. Like, I think because my parents
so good. That movie is so good.
My parents definitely sold some weed. They were drunk.
My parents admittedly were. My mother talks about, like, my mother, who is the farthest thing from that now, and immediately became the farthest thing from that soon after having my eldest sibling. They had like a big scale, and she talks about like, it was so beautiful.
Oh, it was, yes, that was the time when we were selling drugs, but but you were like this big, so why even?
Oh, this predates me. This way predates. This is they closed up shop.
No, like I was definitely born, and I mean I wasn't involved in the operation, but they were young.
You weren't keeping the books.
But Riding in Cars with Boys, Steve Zahn's character gets caught up in like a little weed operation in the house, and it's like it's so perfectly 80s young parents.
But that just goes to show you, like, I just remember scenes from that movie. Like, there's a weird thing in movies where people either...
Oh, yeah. That's me in the front yard. That's me. Woo!
There's this thing about movies that I cannot stand when... And again, Audrey Hepburn running through a Parisian apartment, beautiful. That's what I'm going to that movie for. But when, especially in TV shows and movies, when people's houses are there's a weird balance that people struggle to find. They either don't decorate them at all, and they look completely unlived in, and they look like they just went to IKEA and spent $1,000 and built the set. Right. Or they over decorate them to the point of like, no one lives like this. Like even people who live like this don't live like this. There's a weird balance of like, nice. Like, I don't know. I think somewhere in the 90s, we just fired set designers.
And that's another thing. That's an underappreciated art form is art direction, set design.
Yes.
I mean, and I've from personal experience, been in the thick of that shit. Some of my best friends, Christy, Set Deck, Facebook, I love you if you ever see this video. I mean, they've always been some of my favorite people to work with on set because their eye is on the stuff that fills the shot, the actual painting that you're watching, you know what I mean? And they take great detail, according to whatever storyline it involves, everything down to take a look next time you're watching a movie. Everything you see is put there on fucking purpose.
I was working on an independent film and I had a small part, but I was in like a kitchen. It was a real person's house and they made it look great. but the character had to go to the fridge, and like one of those like white dry erase boards that have magnets that stick to the fridge, and it was like a phone number, so it was like a corded phone because it was like a period piece, and you had period piece. It was like the 70s, and you had to go over to get the number. And the person they literally were about to take the first take, and the set designer, art director / a million things in one said, "Hold on." They went and they grabbed it. They got a marker. They wrote a million things on it, wiped it off. Did it again, wiped it off. Did it again, wiped it off. Did a doodle in the corner, wiped it off, and put it back up. And it never occurred to me. I'm like, yeah, because they just bought it new out of the box or whatever, whatever it looked like. They're like, no real person's house does that thing not look like it's been, we didn't just buy it today.
They called it like schmutz. It happened with me with the wardrobe when that dawned on me. They gave me brand new Chuck Taylors for a TV show that took place in the 60s or something like that, PF Flyers. And then they took this stick of shit and scuffed them up and perfectly made it look, and it was used. It was like a makeup stick. It was makeup lived in weathered makeup for your shoes.
You have to. You have to. It's
that attention to detail. We're getting close to the end there, my friend. I'm sorry. It's hard to like not cut each other off here and there a little bit, but we've managed to make it through.
I think what time did we start? We went pretty quick.
6:23, I do believe. So we're on like 30 some minutes, which is why I like to end it right around here because I get worried. But you've been wonderful. I just wanted to have you on, of course, because you're my dear friend. I love you. We do shit together all the time. And I went back because I never finished watching the interview that you and I had done, that you did of me on your gig over on YouTube.
That was fun.
That's why I was reminded I finished watching it. Because I went back on my page because I've been riddling it with this stuff. So I went back and I saw that, and I watched the portion of the last half of it that I didn't really get to see. And I was like, oh, I'm going to call that motherfucker.
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun. I apologize that I'm lit up like I'm a church statue right now.
And you're wired up like a Christmas tree too, because you've been zinging and banging. I'm going to be trying to edit those out, but everything else is fine. It's perfect. I have a ring light this big. It's not fair. The odds were stacked against you. I got fucking. I feel like Gloria Swanson.
I'm lit by God.
All right. Great picks. Thank you, my friend. Godspeed.
Thank you, buddy.
I will talk to you soon. And goodbye, world. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.